some more chairs. Well, let's get started. Welcome to another Westminster presentation by one of our own neighbors. Okay, Oswald, can you hear us all right?
No. Yes.
Okay, Oswald, we need a little more volume.
Can you hear me okay?
There you go.
Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. We've got a full program tonight. Let me explain that the title of tonight's program, Building Bricks in Austin, has a double meaning. Building can be used as an adjective or a verb. And we're going to be doing both of those tonight. Russ asked me to be sure that we leave some time at the end of the session, so we're going to get started. I'm not going to introduce Russ because you're going to learn so much about him during the presentation tonight. So we're going to move right ahead. Russ, we're going to be looking at a lot of buildings built with your bricks. So why don't you give us a little bit of an explanation to start with what we're going to be looking at.
Thank you, Ken. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Well, Butler Brick Company started right here. These are old wooden old bricks from down on the river. And then we ended up with materials like this that you see on the screen. Now what we're looking at here, if you don't mind standing, what we're looking at here are structural ceramic clay units that can be used in load-bearing situations. These bricks are fired to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and like that modular brick down there, that 3 by 8 brick, has a compressive strength of around 15,000 pounds per square inch. So this stuff is really strong, really structural, and because it's fired so hard and made out of such good clay, this is not this brick. Good clays out of Elgin, that we're able to use these products throughout the United States on exterior buildings. Now the problem with exterior buildings is they get rained on, the water gets on them, and they freeze, thaw, and glazes are particularly susceptible to failing under those conditions. Well, these materials here are one of the very few materials that could be used throughout the United States, exterior building applications, and not have to worry about freeze thaw.
Just a second.
Now, what we're also going to see here is many of these shapes are hand carved, and they're some of them are hand carved, dried, hand glazed, and classed, packaged for shipment. So it's a very laborious process, the kind of units that we're looking at. So it's very hand labor. Now, one last point before we get into the jobs. Our philosophy for the last 40 years that I was kind of with it, we have so many capabilities that most brick or clay people didn't have. In other words, we could make different shapes, different sizes, we could make different glazes, and you could use it in almost any condition, in particular graffiti conditions. These are almost scratch-resistant glazes. So what we're trying to do is educate the architects throughout the United States on how can we get you thinking about our materials and how can you put your creative ideas together to use our materials. You tell us what to make, we're trying to tell you what we can make. So with that, we'll get started on some jobs and maybe that'll make a little bit of sense. This is Johnson & Wales University Culinary School up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and these units are 8 by 8, and 3 by 8. And we have special glazes here. These glazes are matte glazes. This is a red line in Chicago, it's a subway line. And these glazes they wanted materials that were absolutely graffiti resistant. And they wanted a skyline of Chicago on the bricks. And so we worked with them and you can see the blue buildings on the white background there. Now, you also see a red brick in there. Well, here's one of the red bricks from that project. And those are kind of rails that go around it. So when you're looking at this, what can you do? Well, this could be any color, glaze. Where can you use it? Well, there's all kind of crazy ways to use it. All right, here's the blue line in Chicago. Again, these are 8 by 12 units, made most of them. This is a Wyndham Hotel in Houston. Most of those are utility-sized brick. There's one down there at the end that's 4 by 12 in special glazes that we make for the architect. Federal Reserve, some of our face brick is just a standard blue glaze brick. Mayo Clinic, somewhere in Minnesota, I can't remember where it was. Those are 8 glaze. The mosque is some of our glaze brick. Again, these are all in severe weather areas where we're one of the few manufacturers in the United States that could do this, just because of free stock. Seattle, Washington, Children's Theater, 8 by 8. This is an interesting project. It's Rice University. We've got our glazed brick in there, and it's mixed with St. Joe Woodmold brick. St. Joe Woodmold brick was made over in Louisiana. Macy's, New York, and you can see some of the special shapes we're making there. And there's a special glaze for them. This one's probably one of our masterpieces when it comes to shapes, sizes, colors, and you can see where we've got 2 and even 3 colors on the same unit. And they all have to be artistically sprayed to make the mosaics come out perfect. And here's one y'all might recognize, just plain old face brick. Here's another one you might recognize, right by the Capitol building down there. Those are 8 by 8 units. Now up to this point, all the materials that you've seen up here have primarily come out of the Elgin plant. So now jumping back into 1877, we supplied about 3 million of these bricks into the state capitol building. And you won't see any brick because they weren't considered durable enough for these commercial projects, especially state projects. At the same time, my grandparents were building a house using the same brick, finished about the same time as the Capitol building. These are an old Austin Common. Now some of these bricks have been used in buildings where they're being torn down and so forth. And I have some friends here that had some of our old used brick put in their house, and I don't know, there may be several of you out here that have used some of the old Austin Commons that have been torn out of these buildings.
Russ, not many of us have monuments to our families and to ourselves that you have. So let's talk a little bit about how we got to where we are today. Where did your story start, and why did you keep moving your plants?
Started in 1873, and the first real plant got going right there where Zachary Scott Theater is. And we had anyway, where Zachary Scott Theater is. If you want to go to here we go. There's a clay pit that we were mining clay for that plant over by the Zachary Scott Theater. Today, that is a 3-par golf course. It's Butler Pitch and Putt Golf Course right over there by Lamar. So those bricks for the Capitol came out of there. And also those bricks for my grandparents' house, their great-grandparents' house, came out of there. And
Let's talk a bit about how you got the clay from the south side to the north side. You told me that there was no public bridge at that time.
well, this plant was active, and the brick had to be brought from the Zachary Scott Theater across a pontoon bridge into Austin. It was a private bridge. Should I tell that story? Well, we have a newspaper article about had a load of bricks being pulled by a mule wagon, and some guy had 600 head of cattle he was bringing across the bridge the other way. And apparently the cattle got all up panicky and started circulating, and the bridge collapsed. And the local people thought it's right after the Civil War, and they knew what a cannon sounded like. They thought that actually somebody shot a cannon. Well, it wasn't. It was the bridge failure. But it turned out that they lost 185 head of cattle down the river, and the old mule made it okay. Bricks. But anyway, we got into the next plant. We got into, Zilker had a plant where Austin High School is now. And Butler had a fire in his plant, and Zilker went to Butler, says, hey, why don't, instead of you be rebuilding, why don't you buy me out? So we did. So we ended up with a plant that Zilker owned at one time. We ended up with the clay fields over there where the soccer fields are, over there at Zilker Park on the south side of the field. All right, so the plant's on the north side. So they had to haul the clay from the other side, south side to the north side, and they used a cable haulage system. And this is by one of the stanchions for that zip drive to bring the clay across the river.
You said some of the workmen used that zip line to get back and forth.
That in summertime, if the water was right, kids would get on there and just hook around on the bucket and carry the clay. But anyway, if you go around Town Lake, walking down there, this is still there. There's some kind of a history plaque there. All right, now I mentioned that these brick right here were supplied into this house, my great-grandparents' house, about the same time the Capitol was built. Now, if you will note, there is an archway kind of over a window up here. And that archway, that building was torn down in 1971. And I think, like the Jenkins have some stained glass window out of there, or maybe some brick out of there, I'm not sure. But anyway, this was moved to the Zilker Botanical Gardens. And it's been a very popular place. And I'm real proud of my sister, Mita Butler Hunt, who is here. And she, along with the Irish government, along with the Austin Parks and Development Board, just finished a project out here to just re-sculpt the whole area, and it is absolutely gorgeous now. People got married in there. They would stand under the arch and get married there. So anyway, it's kind of if you go to Zilker Park, if you get to the Botanical Gardens, I think you'd just love to see that. It's really nice.
Russ, you told me to keep us moving, so at this point, let me ask you, talk a little bit about the ingredients and how you use them and the process of building bricks. So this gets us started here at the kiln.
Okay. Now basically, I'm going to take us back down to the Elegant plant where we've got this fantastic fire clay. And what it is, we mine the clay out of the ground, we grind it up, mix it with water, and then we mold it with machines, we extrude it. And, but anyway, that's one process. The other process down there is that clay is so good it can be used for fireplaces. And right down here, you will see some kind of a yellowish brick that have Butler on them. Well, those are Butler fire brick, and they're practically all the fireplaces in the Southwest are used. If they had fire brick in them, that's where they came from. So some of the old Austin folks here may recognize, I've seen some of those. So we either extruded it. Most of what we were doing, all the building stuff was extruded with water. We softened it, we dried it, and then we fired it to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. In the beginning, we used beehive kilns. Now this kiln right here still stands. It's down at our old Elegant plant, Butler plant, and it was built in 1903. And the crown of this thing is about 3 feet thick. It's so thick that trees actually can grow in that thing. But anyway, what they did is just like a bunch of fireplaces going around with a lid over it, and they stoke it with coal or wood or whatever to fire the brick. And there's a draw in there, just like a fireplace.
How long did that take?
It took 4 weeks, a month, for us to load and unload that kiln there.
Now, I've heard that you tasted the clay. Is that true?
Well, yeah. I'd rather not get into that. Let's stick with fire and let's go to the next kiln. That's time. I'd have a little scotch with that. That kiln was improved where they put a much bigger chimney on there, and they figured out a way to draw it a little better. And this kiln, it only took 3 weeks to load it and unload it. So the next one is a forced draft kiln where we actually took air and forced the air with electric fans. And we got down to about 2 weeks on that kiln. Now all these kilns were hand loaded. And I can remember when I started down there, 14 years old, we were going inside those kilns with a wheelbarrow. It was pretty tough work. I mean, I couldn't really handle it. I wasn't heavy enough. And those guys knew how to balance it, and they'll toss them up to the top, and when they unload, after it's fired, they toss them down and wheel them out with a wheelbarrow. Then as time went on, we got into what's called a tunnel kiln to make these products. And that's a long, we put cars, they were on railroad tracks, and then we had a shell around it, just a long tunnel, 300 feet long, and we had gas that's gradually going to start at one end, kind of cool, and warm up till we got to 2,000, 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit, then we cool it down. And that would be the result coming out.
How long did that take?
2 days. So there's a big improvement there. Plus, we were able to get a quality on that material that's just almost unequaled anywhere in the ceramic industry.
You might tell us why the clay was so much better in Elgin, and how you find it. How did you discover that clay?
Well, they were getting wood to fire the kilns in Austin from the area south of Elgin. And there was a creek bank going there, Big Sandy Creek, and my grandfather found, getting that wood to send it up to Austin for the kilns, found this clay inside of the bank. He was going to Ohio State University, the only ceramic school in the United States at that time, and he was able to test it and find that it was really pure. And the big purity in there was it didn't have any iron rocks in there.
I don't want to fall off the back of the stick.
Didn't have any iron rocks in there, didn't have any lime or anything like that. You could fire it at a wide firing range. And so that was kind of the main thing about it.
Okay, so we'll go on to the glazes.
Well, these glazes now, we were custom making glazes, and you can, again, at the bottom here, you can see some of the different size shapes that we made. And all of those glazes up there represent production glazes that we supplied jobs on, and they were custom fit to whatever job we had. And and here's some of the decorative tile we had. Took 2 or 3 different colors of glaze to put on there. And we had a lot of trouble down there. When we take visitors through the plant, they always swipe our University of Texas. So I'm sorry, but UT's not up there. Well, that's kind of where we ended up here. We're back to kind of square one. One of the things that we were talking about is the plant that we bought in 1966 in Elgin. In other words, we expanded greatly down there. And I thought I'd tell this story. In 1903, we started that Butler plant in Elgin. In 1905, The Elegant Standard Brick Manufacturing Company got started down there in direct competition with us about a mile from our plant. Each of us had company stores, each of us had company housing. People didn't have cars in, so you had to have company housing. There's fierce competition. Now, they were out mining out of the same play formation we were. There's fierce competition in there. Well, come about 1966, the Elegant Standard Brick Company decided to sell, and the Acme Brick Company was going to buy them. Well, they went to the owner, Buddy Pruitt, or the guy that was running the plant, and said, hey, buddy, where do you want to put your office? What do you mean where I want to put my office? Well, we're buying your plant and we kind of need this office. He got so mad he went to the Butlers, the generation ahead of me, and said, you Butlers want to buy my plant? Okay. So anyway, we got into some tense negotiations. I was just getting into the business about this time. Got into some tense negotiations. For us to buy it, we had to have 51%, not 50%, we had to have 51%. So, so we had a big meeting thinking we had it all worked out. So we had a big round table there to negotiate the final deal. All right, so here we've got Buddy Pruitt, the president of that company. We've got George McCall, who is a partial owner. George McCall, the football player here. I think Bill Coach was there. I think, y'all know Claire, maybe something to do.
Jay Brown.
And so then we had, that was kind of on their side, and we had our attorneys, our CPAs, they had their CPAs, their attorneys, and Jay Brown, who some of y'all know here, was sitting across the table from me. Buddy Pruitt was sitting right here like this next to me, and he said, we got it. Okay, I'll go along with that 51% as long as y'all will agree to buy me out. Well, we already agreed to do that, so we said, okay, well, everything's just fine, and Danny is so nice. And I'm sitting there next to Buddy Pruitt like this, and all of a sudden he reaches in the sleeve of his coat and pulls out a Derringer. Russ Butler is looking at that damn thing, and he don't know what to do. So I'm sitting there, and I kind of look up like this, and who's the smartest guy in the room? Jay Brown. Jay Brown's looking at me. Anyway, it all smoothed out. We got the deal done, and
So maybe this partly answered the question, but why do you have those big ponds of water down there at the Elgin around your plant?
you know, environmentally, what they like about brick plants is when you dig out and you've got clay in there, you leave a nice pond, and they like water. And so that's primarily what we had at the brick plant.
Recently, they've had a lot of coal mining over there. Did you substitute coal for?
We had coal above our clay. We had to go through lignite to get to our fire clay. And that was really more of a problem than anything. Actually, we did fire with coal at one time, and the University of Texas used some of that lignite down there. It's very low-grade coal. Anyway.
So that, back there when we're talking about the glaze lab, you were in ceramics, and you did your engineering degree in chemistry, and they did away with that glaze plant, and you bought the whole lab.
Well, at the University of Texas, yeah, they had a ceramic school active a few years prior to the time that I went there, and so I minored in ceramics. But when they decided to sell off that lab that they had at the University of Texas, we bought it. So,
Well, you were talking about using coal to fire your kilns. Tell us about that venture you got into accidentally on. You used the gas.
well, one of the processes that's out there available, you can take coal, heat it up, and drive the volatiles off, and you have a combustible gas. And you can take lignite and do the same thing. It's just 50% ash, which makes it pretty inefficient. But we were doing that. We actually did that for a while. But one of the more interesting, I think one of the things that's kind of interesting is we are one of the first people in Texas to transport natural gas by truck. And what happened was, I think it was around 1975, somewhere in there we had a big gas crisis, natural gas crisis in Texas, and the price of gas was going from $2 an inch, 1,000 cubic feet, to $6 to $10. And boy, it was getting kind of rough. And there was a gas plant shut in near Giddings. They couldn't market their gas because they couldn't, no pipelines to get it to. So Don Fowler here, an engineer here in Austin, guy came to me and said, hey, we want to truck this gas into you. I said, what are you talking about, truck that gas? Well, we're going to compress it, put it in these steel bottles, kind of like these acetylene bottles or tanks or whatever they have, and we'll bring it in under high pressure. I said, isn't that dangerous? He said, well, if you ever wreck with one of those, the gas just goes up. I said, if you ever wreck in one of these gasoline trucks that fuels gas from your car, that's really dangerous. I know, you got a point there. So we did. We started trucking in natural gas from Giddings, and it's kind of interesting because when it's compressed to like 2,800 pounds per square inch or so. And as it expands where you can use it down to 40 pounds per square inch, it gets real cold. And we had pipes coming in from our gas meter house above ground, like about 10 or 15 feet. And those going to the kilns. And during this hot summertime, you'd see icicles coming all the way almost to the ground where the gas was coming in. But it turned out that Don Fowler ended up writing all the Railroad Commission regulations for trucking gas or that type of material for the state.
Talk to us a little bit about your competitors. Lumber, you had other people who were competing with the use of bricks.
You're really getting into kind of an industry application here. From about the 1920s, I'm going to guess somewhere in there, when they learned to extrude hollow clay units, they didn't have concrete block at that time. So you had structural clay tile, and it was hollow tile. It's kind of like what we were looking at. And so you had clay tile plants around like lumber yards. And that was really kind of what there were. The Hannis Brick Company was one of them, and there was one, Seguin, there was various ones. And that's kind of where we all kind of got our business at, making face brick and structural building tile. Well, we had such good clay we could put a glaze on it. But then along comes concrete block. And this is about 1950, 1960. And concrete block were so much cheaper to make, and they could make them, well, y'all know what a concrete block is. And they were so cheap that they literally wiped out in a 10-year period of time the entire structural clay tile business. And we were able to hang in there because we were making face brick and we were making glaze stuff and all of that. Well, then a little later on, about like about 2000, let's say, concrete block, they were started putting plastic coats on there to compete with our structural glazed tile. But we were okay because it would burn, you could scratch it, you know. So we were okay. We were handling it all right nationwide. And they certainly couldn't use it on the outside of the building. But then they got to where they got those plastics where they were pretty doggone good. And they were so much cheaper that it worked basically pretty well the death knell for the structural glazed tile industry.
Might explain the advantages of being able to put these holes in these bricks.
Well, these bricks are, you're extruding them horizontally, and when you build a wall, you've got your mortar joints going this way, where you can lay steel reinforcing along the joints this way. but you needed to have vertical reinforcing in there as well to make that wall work. So we developed, and this was kind of, we didn't patent it, but we were the only ones that could do it, ways to punch holes in these things. We were extruding this material and able to punch a hole in it as we were extruding it. And so that kind of really helped us out a great deal.
Talk to us a little bit about the railroads. You have a Butler rail line over there?
Well, it used to be in the, all the material practically that came out of that Butler plant in Elgin, left by rail. Either that or mule drawn wagons. And then you got a few trucks in there. Even when I started, when I was 14, this is like 19, not 50, more than 1940, 50 era. Everything's just going out there by rail. And then after a while, they got to where the trucks were coming in and they were more efficient, and the rails got so inefficient that, and for us to handle this high dollar material, we ended up with the plants down there basically shipping everything out of there by truck. Well, the rail line going from Austin to Giddings, which we went off on the Butler spur, it just died. There wasn't any business on it. Well, they were getting ready to sell that line to developers and do something with it. And we had a bunch of us get together and tried to, and fought that deal to try to save that line, because once that line was gone, it would never, we figured that somewhere down the line, somebody's gonna want to use that rail line. And so we were able to delay all that until finally it's back in use again, it's alive, running, working rail line there.
Talk to us a little bit about World War II and the impact that you had, labor problems.
Let's see, I've got a letter here from the War Manpower Commission where in World War II, they classified this plant in Austin as non-essential and it was shut down. That's when the plant where Austin High School is, the old Zilker plant, it was shut down. And the plant in Elgin, though, was classified as an essential activity, and it kept going. And it was supplying army bases and stuff like that.
Czechs. Talk to us about the Czech labor.
Oh. During World War II, we had, they brought prisoners, Czechoslovakian prisoners over to Camp Swift. Well, we were short on labor. We needed help. So we ended up bringing the prisoners over by bus every day, take them back to the prison at night, and come over and we were working prisoners. Well, these Czechoslovakian guys, they didn't want to go back. They ended up staying here, but from years we still have them working for us.
Well, Russ, you asked me to save some time at the end, and I didn't introduce you because I thought very much of your life and family relation, everything would come out here. But I need to add something you left out, that you served as a captain in the Army, in the U.S. Army. You've already said you started at age 14. You held every research and development position in the company and served for president for nearly 25 years. Russ, you might want to introduce some of your family here tonight, and then
Well, I'm very lucky.
ask them all to stand up.
Yeah, family, stand up, please. Just wait a minute.
So, John, I think
Rita, would you like to say anything about
meeting.
over at the park, or the development of Michael Butler Park that's going on over there? Or? Rita has been so active with the park system over there around Zilker.
Well, My great-grandfather, Michael Butler, came over from Limerick, Ireland. And he started the brick company, if you heard Russ say, in 1873. But what he did, he bought all the land from behind Zipper Park over to First Street, right?
Yeah.
And it was like 93 acres. And they used it, that's where all the Austin Common brick you heard him mention, this kind of blonde color, until they moved, found better clay out of Elgin. But, so this 93 acres, I think it was Tom Miller was mayor,
I think so.
and several business people, men in Austin, or some women, they were still trying to get in. We're still trying to get in. Anyway, so they decided to donate that land to Austin City. They had taxes of $60,000. It was 93 acres that they gave along. They waived the 60,000 tax, and then they gave the 93 acres to Austin. And that's where the Long Center is. They didn't zone it, so the land by Zachary Scott Theater was all sold by the city, all along Lamar there. But that land was called, back then, Butler Civic Center. And then a new council came in about 15 years ago, and they said, we have 23 acres. We want you to name it Austin. Well, I said, wait, you can't do that. That was history of the history, not our name, but the land was given to the city. Well, they decided that it should be a park, and so people put in different names that the park should be, like Liz Carpenter Park, Doug Somm, he was a folk singer, the Children's Park, and Willie Wells, African American who couldn't play in the States. He invented a great thing for baseball. Anyway, so all those were names suggested should be the name of this 23 acres that was in with the 93 acres. Well, so what happened is that several friends of ours, so we said, wait, you can't do that. It's named Butler Civic Center. So what we did, it took me about 8 years, but we got it named. It's called Michael Butler Park. Within it, Doug Somm Hill, Liz Carpenter Fountain, and Willie Wells baseball diamonds there, and the Children's Park is great. So that all is there now, history corrected. So I just want to let you know that.
We had some architects in the audience.
Questions?
Any comments from
Excuse me.
Briefly, Brandon Phil.
Bricks, is this on?
Yeah.
Bricks are heavy to transport. My question is, what quality marketing and economics allowed you to compete successfully in distant areas like Chicago, Minnesota, etc.?
That's a good question, and we trucked all of those units to Toronto, Seattle, Washington, all those places. Those units are all trucked. It's a very expensive product when you add all that in there. Trucked.
Well, as an architect, I have a question.
Economics.
Pardon?
As an architect, I have a question. I spent a few years working in San Antonio for a man named Raymond Phelps. You know Raymond, right? Are you Raymond? Anyway, I got to work with him for a few years. It was a joy working with Raymond.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. He was great.
Yeah, question over here. Thanks for coming. Back in the 80s, the city of Austin ripped up a couple of blocks on Congress Avenue, and they were made from bricks, big, heavy, dark red bricks. And they were selling them for $5 or $10 each. I bought a couple of them, lost track of them. Do you have any history about that?
Those are not our brick. And they're brought in from distant areas, I mean, they're almost glass, to withstand the traffic and the weathering and all of that. That is the most severe usage you can put to a ceramic product. And, our material would not qualify for that use. And so, I know some of them came from St. Louis, not necessarily those, but
Maybe you said it and I missed it, but when you had the Zilker operation with the zip line on the south side of the river, transported the clay to the north side, where was the kiln?
the kilns, the Zilker kilns were right there where the school is.
Thank you.
Well, we'll stay around for questions if you'd like to come up and take a look at some of the bricks. One more question here.
Is Butler Brick still in business? If not, when did they close down?
Okay, we finally sold in 2005, I believe it was, the last plant in 2005, and then the purchaser continued to operate it for about 10 years, and then it's almost gone now.
Do y'all still own the land down in Elgin where the different
Yeah, we
buildings are?
sold that.
I see. Thank you.
I just wish we had a few acres over there by Zilker Park.
There's a question here.
Could you tell a little bit about the history of St. Mary's Church, the Butler Bell, your great-grandfather, how you had the Masons, and they built it to the Irish clover relief on top of the entrance?
Why don't you hand him the microphone, let him. What he's referring to is the family was very involved way back there, 1873, also just developing, and great-grandfather was involved with St. Patrick's Church, and then got over to St. Mary's Catholic Church over there. When they were building it, they supplied the bells for the church, and we went over there one time when they had an anniversary of some sort. It's a cathedral. And climbed up there. It was a rickety wooden bell going all the way up there. Man, and they were still ringing those bells up there. And you know, those bells weighed several thousand pounds. And they were cast in St. Louis. Anyway, they finally redid all that, strengthened it up. So is there something I'm missing on that day?
Yeah, all the families' names the Butler family name are all engraved in the bells. So they call it, our family's names are all engraved in the bell. And so they call it, I guess, the Butler Bell. Apparently it's the second largest bell west of the Mississippi River. And then local lore goes that your great-grandfather had the Masons do an Irish clover leaf, engrave it in the stone above the entrance to the church. And then your great-grandfather has, I think it's a Tiffany glass stained window right there. So a lot of history of the church there. St. Mary's.
Well, let's thank Russ and his family for being here. Make this place.
I'd like to thank Ken. He had a rough subject to work with.